to the World War II newspaper channel where we read the Chicago Tribune one day at a time, going through World War II as it happened through the eyes of those who lived it. If you enjoy content like this, please subscribe to this channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications when a new upload is going to premiere. And also, if you want to hear the actual newsmakers, go check out my other channel, the companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. There we have vintage broadcasts, including newscasts, speeches, old movies, and music. And subscribe to that channel and click on the bell icon. Now for the newspaper. News as read from the Chicago Tribune for Sunday, January 12th, 1941. The weather today. The sun rose at 7:17 a.m. It set at 4:40 p.m. For Chicago and vicinity, partly cloudy today. Tomorrow, increasing cloudiness. Not much change in temperature. Gentle to moderate west to northwest winds. The low temperature, 27 degrees. The high temperature, 32. Today's headline, Fight Over FDR Bill is on. New York, January 11th. Dr. Philip C. Jessup of Columbia University, one of America's foremost authorities on international law, asserted tonight that the opening of America's seaports for the repair and reconditioning of British warships proposed by President Roosevelt would constitute a clear violation of international law. There can be no argument about it, he said. Dr. Jessup has been a member of the Columbia University faculty since 1925. He is a divisional director of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and was at one time a solicitor for the Department of State. Washington, D.C., January 11th. President Roosevelt's request for unprecedented powers to extend aid to nations at war with the Axis powers encountered its first congressional obstacle, an unexpected one today. The House Military Affairs Committee voted 15-4 to demand control of the measure introduced yesterday, which would clothe the president with unlimited authority to manufacture and procure war munitions, to dispose of them as he sees fit to any nation he chooses, to give away military secrets, and to open American ports to the warships of Great Britain. Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn, Democrat, Texas, had, in accordance with administration desires, referred the bill to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, headed by Representative Sol Bloom, Democrat, New York, one of the most rabid interventionists in Congress. The measure would have been pushed through this committee and brought hurriedly to the floor for action by January 21st. Bloom already had ordered a hearing on the bill for next Tuesday and had hoped to complete hearings by Thursday. Today's action of the Military Affairs Committee paved the way for a fight in the House on Monday. Chairman Andrew J. May, Democrat, Kentucky, was directed in a resolution adopted by the committee to move that the bill be withdrawn from the Foreign Affairs Group and sent to his committee. If Speaker Rayburn overrules this motion, May was instructed to appeal to the membership from the decision of the chair. May said he will demand a roll call vote on the motion if this course is necessary. Such a vote might furnish the first true picture of House reaction to the bill, which has been assailed by non-interventionists as creating a totalitarian dictatorship in the United States. May said the administration bill is a matter of national defense altogether and deals entirely with military matters, the disposition of war, and Navy supplies. President was clear, he said, for sending such bills to his committee rather than to the Foreign Affairs Committee. Why, under this bill, the president could give away a whole Navy and all of the Army supplies, he commented. We would be stripped stark naked. If the Military Affairs Committee gains control of the measure, its progress through the House will not be as rapid as been expected by the administration leaders, it was conceded. The committee is particularly desirous that the Army get its expansion and equipment program into full swing and would be reluctant to give Mr. Roosevelt the power to ship to Great Britain war materials needed for national defense. Washington, D.C., January 11th. The first verbal gun in the impending battle of oratory over the Aid to Britain bill, which will keep the airwaves burning during the next few weeks, was fired tonight by Representative Hamilton Fish, Republican, New York. Under the spacious guise of aiding democracies abroad, Fish said in a radio broadcast, the bill is a complete and total abrogation of democracy at home. It is a totalitarian technique in its most brazen form, placing the 90% of the American people who oppose war 99% of the way into Europe's and Asia's wars. If this bill passes in its present form, the Congress might as well dissolve, as it would give the president full and complete control over the destinies of our people in both domestic and foreign affairs. Washington, D.C., January 11th. A study of the administration's British aid bill led some legislatures to the conclusion today that it would empower President Roosevelt to seize foreign merchant ships in American ports and turn them over to Britain if he desired. There were 266 such vessels, refugees from the war, tied up in American ports on January 1st. Ronald Cross, British Minister of Shipping, recently said that he was casting covetous eyes on the Axis ships among them. In turn, spokesmen in Berlin and Rome indicated that it would be regarded as an act of war if the United States made these craft available to Britain. Most Congress members took the view that the extent of power proposed for President Roosevelt was a delicate question of law, but Andrew J. May, Democrat Kentucky, chairman of the House Military Committee, told newsmen the administration's bill would without question confer power on the president to take over the ships if they were needed by any government whose defense he deemed vital to the defense of the United States. Some others said privately that they concurred in this opinion. May based his statement on language in the bill defining a defense article, among other things, as any one to which the United States or any foreign government has or hereafter acquires title, possession, or control. The refugee fleet includes 27 Italian vessels, 2 German, and 41 Danish, the latter regarded by Britain as of enemy character. And now for world news. The Greek advanced troops near Klissura, Albania, January 9th, delayed. For the last 2 days, I have watched Greek troops rolling forward relentlessly against odds to take the key town of Klissura in what the general commanding the operations told me was the most important battle of the war to date. Klissura fell to the Greeks on Friday. All roads out of Klissura are now under Greek artillery fire. Hundreds of prisoners and gains up to 6 miles in 2 days over slopes covered with mud and snow are the Greek score. From an advanced post on a hill just above the battle, I watched Greek soldiers toil up the slopes against rifle, machine gun, and mortar fire while wave after wave of Italian planes hammered them from above. I could see the Italians moving atop the mountain, which was the Greeks' chief objective. As the last of them disappeared into the woods and bushes, roughly about a mile from where I stood, I could see the Greeks charging across a clearing after them. Heavy bursts of mortar fire caused a momentary check, and then the attacks were resumed. The mortar fire ceased. Rockets swept into the air, and the officer beside me said, "We have cleared the hill." Now they are going for the one on the left. They are sweeping them back into the valley. Below us, a steady stream of Italian prisoners was seen across the hillside moving toward the rear, bedraggled, bearded, dragging their feet, and begging cigarettes from passing Greek soldiers. The battle started far to our right yesterday, meaning Wednesday morning, after 1 hour of artillery preparation. Before daybreak, Greek forces moved forward against Italian mortars and machine guns and pressed steadily forward to bring the right of the line around toward the Klissura road. A little after 11 o'clock, as the sky cleared, waves of Italian planes began appearing, as many as 33 in action at one time. I passed that night in an Albanian peasant hut as the guest of a kindly, mustached Greek major who told me, "You will have a good alarm clock tomorrow," meaning Thursday. He was right. At 6 o'clock, there was a sudden growl of gunfire. It was an Italian mortar. Then a terrific crash was heard from below, Greek howitzers smashing Italian positions before the attack. As we arrived at the advanced post at 8 o'clock, flashes of nearby guns were followed by the sound of shells overhead and then faraway explosions. Below us, the battle continued to develop, with the Greek forces farther away and gradually bringing their line to the Klissura-Berat road. All day there were continued Greek successes. The general in command greeted me with a broad smile. "Now you have seen how Greek troops do it," he said. Before leaving the actual battle zone, I saw something of the price of war walking among the unburied dead of both sides. Most of the dead had been buried even under fire, but scattered along one little patch of mountainside, I saw 23 lying where death overtook them in a machine gun or mortar post, or with little heaps of hand grenades beside them. Italians trying to stem the advance, and a few of the Greeks who fell as they charged forward. One young Italian still clutched a photograph of a pretty girl, which was inscribed, "To my big boy from your Anna." Most of the dead had had no time to think of photographs or anything else. They lay contorted under bushes or in shallow pits where they were handling their guns when they were struck. Cairo, January 11th. Italy's Marshal Rodolfo Graziani made no move today to relieve his beleaguered garrison at Tobruk, 80 miles inside Libya, but the British moved up troops and guns under massive air protection and plopped shells into the seaport semicircle of defenses from 4 carefully placed batteries. The guns of Tobruk replied, but aside from these artillery duels, there was no fighting on the 4th day of the siege. RAF patrols were out all day and yesterday on the road west of Tobruk, leading to Derna, where British mechanized ground forces also are operating, but there was no conclusive engagement with fascist airmen. Despite his tremendous losses, Graziani still has a considerable army to the west, but the fact that it is not coming up leads the British to believe that Tobruk will fall, as did Bardia, Solom, and Sidi Barrani before it. The size of the Tobruk garrison is not known here, but it is believed smaller than that of Bardia. The latter turned out to be considerably larger than the British anticipated, for official figures released today put the captured dead and wounded there at 2,041 officers and 42,827 men. Of these, more than 40,000 were prisoners, for the Italian dead and wounded at Bardia did not exceed 2,000. Total Italian losses in the last month are figured at somewhere around 83,500 dead, wounded, or imprisoned from 5 regular divisions and 3 black shirt brigades destroyed by the British. Figures for total equipment captured since the British blitzkrieg began in Egypt are light tanks 162, guns of all calibers 589, artillery ammunition rounds 30,000, machine guns 600, light machine guns 700, rifle and machine gun ammunition rounds 11 million, lorries, which are trucks, by the way, for you Americans out there, 1,700. A special British communique announced that yet another of the black shirt or fascist militia generals who absented himself just before the capture of Bardia has been retrieved while trying to escape on foot towards Tobruk. While the North African armies maneuvered today for the grand assault on Tobruk, the Middle East Command announced the continuance of vigorous patrol action against the Italian masters of Ethiopia. No details were given of the thrusts against the Ethiopian part of the fascist empire, thrusts made from the Sudan and Kenyan frontiers. During the day, the RAF announced new and widespread attacks both in Libya and in Ethiopia. In Libya, it was stated a number of Italian planes were destroyed at Burqa and at Banina, an airdrome, runways, hangars, and aircraft on the ground were hit. Rome, January 11th. The Italian High Command today reported artillery actions at Tobruk in Libya near the Jarabub, more than 150 miles to the south. On the score of fascist losses in North Africa, the High Command announced that 77 soldiers had been killed, 307 wounded, and that 343 were missing during December, and that naval losses for that month were 119 killed, 82 wounded, and 172 missing. Casualties among land forces in East Africa were put at 41 killed, 54 wounded, and 25 missing. These figures, vastly at variance with those of the British, would not cover Italy's loss on January 5th of Bardia. Berlin, January 11th. A series of attacks by Italian German air squadrons on British sea communications in the Mediterranean is expected in Berlin following the announcement today that the German Air Corps recently dispatched to the Mediterranean had made its first successful attack on British naval units off Sicily yesterday. The Germans are confident that they will succeed in disrupting British sea communications between the western and eastern Mediterranean, which would greatly hamper the British advance in Libya. The claim that two British aircraft carriers were damaged by German and Italian planes evoked special satisfaction here. A cruiser and destroyer also were hit, the Italians said. Thanks to its 3 aircraft carriers stationed in the Mediterranean, the Germans hold, Britain has been able to maintain sea communications between Gibraltar and Alexandria. The German Air Force, it is believed, employs bombs which are many times more powerful than those used by the Italians. A direct hit by such a heavy bomb on an aircraft carrier probably would necessitate repairs lasting several weeks. Also, such a heavy bomb falling into the water close to a ship has the effect of a torpedo when it explodes through its impact in the water. Rome, January 11th. In a communique stressing the fraternal, close cooperation of the Nazi Air Force with the Italians in the first action for the Germans in the Mediterranean, the fascist high command today said that 4 British warships had been struck in an attack delivered yesterday. The detailed results, the Italians said, were these: an aircraft carrier hit by an Italian aerial torpedo, a cruiser struck by 2 heavy bombs from Italian dive bombers, a second aircraft carrier hit by heavy Italian bombs. One of these aircraft carriers hit also by both heavy and medium German bombs, a destroyer hit by the Germans. The Italians acknowledged that British fleet guns and British planes offered a violent reaction to the German-Italian assault, but claimed nevertheless all of our planes returned to their bases. The first clash, the Italians reported, took place 10 miles northeast of Linosa, an island near Malta and south of Sicily. The second engagement was reported 40 miles southeast of Pantelleria, south of Sicily, while the third bombardment was reported southwest of Malta. An account of the engagement by Stefani, the official Italian news agency, said the British warships were protecting a convoy apparently bound for Egypt when the Germans and Italians fell upon them. The attacks, it was said, were launched by 2 Italian torpedo planes which swept low to discharge their projectiles while British planes swarmed up to the counterattack. London, January 11th. Vice Admiral Imo Muselier, Commander-in-Chief of the Free French Naval Forces fighting at Britain's side tonight, broadcast an appeal to men of the inactive French fleet at Alexandria to join the struggle. French units there were disarmed after the French armistice. Muselier said the Free French fleet has 30 men of war and 80 merchantmen in service, and that all save 50 of the merchantmen are manned by French crews. New York, January 11th. Prime Minister Jan C. Smuts of the Union of South Africa broadcast today that South Africa's role in 1941 to help clear Ethiopia and British Somaliland of Italian forces. That is the task to which South Africa has dedicated herself and all her resources, he said. Cairo, Egypt, January 11th. Colonel William J. Donovan, who is regarded as personal representative of United States Navy Secretary Frank Knox, set out into the desert today for a tour of the British front in Libya. Rome, January 11th. Italian casualties in the war against Greece from the start of hostilities on October 28th to December 31st were announced officially today to be 12,377 men, of which 2,081 were listed as killed, 6,515 wounded, and 3,781 missing. These included 58 Albanians killed, 53 wounded, and 108 missing. Italian authorities contrasted the figures with reported British estimates of 35,000 Italians wounded and Greek announcements that 14,000 prisoners had been captured. The High Command announced that the Italian Air Force lost 289 men in December, including 72 killed, 99 wounded, and 118 missing. London, January 11th. German bombers tonight kept rooftop watchers and firefighters in all parts of London busy putting out hundreds of incendiary bombs during an intense raid which lasted nearly 4 hours. For a while, with the constant droning of airplanes, the clattering of incendiaries, and the thunderous roar of high explosive bombs and the barking of anti-aircraft fire seemed to indicate one of London's worst raids was in progress. However, the rooftop watchers and civilians were on their toes and most of the fires were quickly brought under control. As a result, the attack did not achieve the destructiveness of the fire raid on December 29th. Thousands of firebombs were loosed over the whole London area, but only a few big fires resulted. These were quickly brought under control. One hotel received a shower of incendiaries which were quickly pounced on by a fire squad and caused little damage. One shot through a ground floor window with the force of a projectile from a gun and set fire to a private printing press which was destroyed. Others fell in the hotel court, with several piercing the fabric roofs of parked automobiles, setting fire to the upholstery. These were smothered before the gas tanks were ignited. This correspondent was en route to the Tribune office when a Molotov bread basket burst almost over an automobile, scattering fire bombs all around. Most of them fell on the road, where they were quickly extinguished by passerbys, with the correspondent lending a hand. One incendiary slithered under an automobile which the owner had left locked and with the brakes on. Unable to push the car clear, we took hold of the bumpers and running boards and lifted it off the fire, which was then promptly snuffed out. Some fatalities were caused during the raid when one explosive bomb crashed through the roof of a subway used as an air raid shelter and another hit a bus. Belfast, Northern Ireland, January 11th. Barrage balloons drifting across Ireland fouled cable lines and cut off power today in parts of 2 counties. Lisbon, Portugal, December 18th by airmail, December 18th, 1940. So that's about almost a month ago. Flying nets like the advertising streamers carried by airplanes in America may be used by the British to combat the menace of night air raids. Among the plans being discussed in air circles is a system which visualizes use of planes considered too slow for combat use, which would be sent up to pull nets back and forth at various heights to enmesh enemy raiders. The principle of this plan is similar to the advertising streamers seen by Americans at public gatherings, except on a vastly larger scale. Pilots believe an old, outmoded plane could pull a net 100 times as large as the plane. Hence, the pilot would have a 101 chance of catching a raider against the chance of colliding with it. In case of a collision, it is pointed out the trade in destruction would be a junked plane for a modern bomber, making the British easy winners. One thing that may foretell a quicker outcome of the war than generally expected should another severe winter be experienced in the belligerent countries is public morale. Informants who have reached Lisbon recently from Germany report that an undercurrent of discontent is beginning to be heard. The reason given for this is twofold. First, Führer Adolf Hitler has not made good on 2 promises: that the war would be over in September and that no enemy plane could penetrate the German air raid defenses. Second, the strict food rationing in Germany is causing bitter complaints. The Germans' chief complaint, as I learned when I was in Germany last July, is not for themselves, but for their children. They say the rations are sufficient for adults, but not for growing children. Therein lies the key to the German morale. While the British are receiving some wicked punches, they look on the ruins of their homes or stores with full stomachs as compared with the Germans. The destruction of property in England is having a directly opposite effect on the British morale than Hitler expected. A good example of the present status may be gained from a conversation between 2 elderly women sitting by the fire in the drawing room of a hotel on the coast of southern England. The air raid siren sounded, an anti-aircraft fire was heard, but the women made no move toward the shelters. One lady remarked, My, I do hope they don't do this town what they did in Southampton last Sunday. Well, the other replied, if worse comes to worse, we simply will have to become human moles and bury into the ground until it is over. Or burrow into the ground until it is over. Dublin, January 11th. The Irish government announced today that the external government concerned would be asked to accept liability where the origin of bombs or other weapons of aerial attack dropped on this country can be established, and added, pending the outcome of such representation, the Irish government takes responsibility for making good damage caused and relieving distress. After announcing identification of certain bombs and aerial sea mines dropped last week in the Dublin area as of German origin, the Irish government ordered a protest at Berlin. German sources denied responsibility. Portsmouth, England, January 11th. This British naval station, one of the Nazi Air Force's sorely tried targets on the short hop across the Channel, bore the deep scars today of the Luftwaffe's one town a night blitz attack. Leaving the rest of Britain in relative peace, Nazi planes streamed in over the south coast through Friday night and dropped hundreds of firebombs and high explosives on Portsmouth and its 250,000 inhabitants. A government announcement admitted a number of fatalities and considerable damage to buildings and homes. Several large stores and 6 burned-out movie theaters were among the damaged buildings. Some residential areas were cleared because of the danger of unexploded delayed-action bombs. Heavy casualties were reported in one air raid precautions post, said to have suffered a direct hit. Good neighbor groups of firemen and rescue workers, many of whom from nearby towns, were credited with having prevented heavier destruction. The homeless were collected at special centers to receive food and clothing. Rigid British censorship was applied to reports on the raid. The first page of one dispatch to the Associated Press contained only one word: Portsmouth. All else had been deleted. In Berlin, authorized Germans said the Portsmouth raid was highly effective. Berlin, January 11th. Reichsmarschall Hermann Wilhelm Goering, chief of the German Air Force, today declared it is impossible to compare Britain's air raids on Germany with the German aerial attacks on England. When I get reports in the morning about the number of English planes that flew into Germany and the number of bombs they dropped, maybe 200 or 400 or 600 incendiary bombs, and when at the same moment I see reports that we dropped 180,000 or 220,000 or 240,000 incendiary bombs, I must say the difference is tremendous, he stated. Goering spoke to 574 miners who received war service crosses, and his remarks were broadcast. After admitting that it is certainly not agreeable when enemy bombs are dropped, he put the number of enemy planes which generally raid this or that German city at 20 to 30, he added. When an English raid takes place, we remember how it must look, where our 300, 400, or 500 planes have attacked, especially since every one of these planes carries 10 times as much as the British planes because, thank God, the distance to England from the bases we conquered is only 1/10 of the way the English must fly. Goering said that here and there an enemy bomb may have caused delay in a German plant, but no single armament plant of importance has been eliminated. In England, he claimed 60 to 70% of the armament centers have been impaired or destroyed. He appealed to the country's 900,000 miners to continue to further increase their achievements. Of Britain's shipping, Goering said, the number of these vessels will grow less and less until at the end none of them is left. That must be and will be achieved. Helsingfors, Finland, January 11th. Another fleet of German steamers is expected to arrive in the Baltic harbors of Tallinn and Pärnu, Estonia, and Riga, Windau, and Libau, Latvia, next week to complete the repatriation of German Balts. The persons they will take to Germany are the descendants of Germans who conquered the Baltic provinces 7 centuries ago. A year ago, Germany repatriated 60,000 from Latvia and 14,000 from Estonia. The new migration will include Germans who have intermarried with Letts and Estonians. Parents of nationalities other than German who have sent their children to German schools in the Baltic states are also permitted to apply for German citizenship, and many are doing so. Preparations are being made to convey 40,000 to 50,000 convey 40,000 to 50,000 refugees from the Russian-occupied Baltic states to the lands Germany recovered in the Polish corridor. When the Poles obtained their corridor to the Baltic Sea, they forced the evacuation of more than 2 million Germans from the provinces, which are being partly colonized by the German Balts. The plans of the remaining Germans to depart has deepened the despair of the Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians. Ever since the Russian army occupied the Baltic states and overturned their governments, the inhabitants have been praying for Adolf Hitler to rescue them from Joseph Stalin. Since its arrival last July in Riga, the Russian GPU, or secret police, has executed 1,200 Latvians and 8,000 families have been arrested and transported to provinces in the interior of Russia. Because of the disorders and hysterical scenes that took place at the Riga railroad station when trains guarded by the GPU were packed with exiles, the Soviet government is now using the steamer Joseph Stalin to convey the prisoners from Riga to Leningrad. The steamer is loaded and departs at night. There have been even more execution and exiles in Estonia. Let me pause there for a second. I do not usually, or I've been trying less and less to impart my own personal views or experiences in the news. But it was interesting that they said that a lot of the Poles or Baltic people in the eastern area that was taken over by the Soviets were praying for Adolf Hitler to come in and free them from Joseph Stalin. And I can concur that statement because my grandparents on my dad's side, my paternal grandparents, were from Lviv, which is now part of LWOW, which is now part of the Ukraine, but back then it was part of Poland and part of the zone that was taken over by Stalin. And my grandparents both lived under Hitler and Stalin, and they said they liked Stalin far worse. They could not stand Stalin. They were able to tolerate Hitler, believe it or not, but they just could not stand Stalin. And they were really, they told me stories of kids in their classroom. This was under Hitler, it wasn't under Stalin, but they would tell me stories because they were teenagers then. My grandfather, at the latter part of the war, served in the British military as a courier in 1945, I believe. But early on in the war, he was just a teenager, and I heard stories that they would be in a classroom, my grandmother and him, and kids would be taken out of the classroom or would just be gone the next day, and they would not know what happened to them. And that was under Hitler. And this is kind of a strange quote in a way, but they said that Stalin would always hurt his own people, and they said Hitler didn't, which was kind of weird, but I guess that was the frame of mind of Eastern Europeans back then, because Hitler did hurt his own people, Jews, but he didn't consider, and maybe my grandparents didn't either consider Jews their own people. So it was just kind of a strange way of thinking, but they preferred Hitler over Stalin in a strange way. That's just my personal family experience on this topic here. Hong Kong, January 11th. More than 300 Japanese soldiers were killed or injured and a quantity of war supplies destroyed when a Japanese troop train struck a Chinese mine on the Peking-Hankow Railroad in North Hubei Province, the Chinese Central News Agency reported today. The locomotive and 13 coaches were reported wrecked. The same agency also reported that a Japanese transport carrying troops and supplies sank in the Yangtze River off Hanqing on January 1st after striking a Chinese mine. La Paz, Bolivia, January 11th. A British commercial mission headed by Sir Henry Chilton arrived tonight from Chile and was greeted by high government officials. Some papers reminded Bolivians of the important British investments in the country which have contributed to the nation's industrial development. London, January 11th. Half of Britain's 36s, men born between July 1st and December 31st, 1904, and 20-year-olds born between November 10th and December 31st, 1920, a total of about 120,000 registered for military service today. Although official figures are lacking, it is estimated more than 4 million men now are registered. A total of 3,675,000 were reported under arms December 20th, 1940. The men, more than 30 who registered today, were the first permitted to apply for vacancies in civil defense, the auxiliary fire and first aid services, and the police war reserve instead of for the Army, Navy, or Air Force. The second half of the 36 class will register next Saturday. Sofia, Bulgaria, January 11th. A member of the government majority in Parliament declared in effect today in a newspaper article that Bulgaria must open her doors if requested by a great power. Presumably, he was referring to speculation over German troop transit through Bulgaria to Greece and the Dardanelles. Official circles, however, said that the author of the article, Deputy Christo Statif, wrote purely as a private citizen, and they reiterated that Bulgaria's policy was one of consistently seeking peace. Statif wrote that under the present circumstances, the policies and desires of all neutral states are entirely dependent upon the military and diplomatic moves of great powers. He added that neither political idealism nor political manipulation can prevent events when, with a bloody fist, they knock on closed doors. We must receive events with open eyes if we want to be realists and guard our own interests. Ottawa, Ontario, January 11th. A plan to construct a series of air bases between the United States border and Alaska will be announced shortly by the Canadian government, it was reliably reported today. The bases will be built by Canada but will be available for use by United States military planes. The project will provide the United States a safe year-round airway to Alaska for single or large squadrons of fast pursuit planes. An existing commercial route already is being flown winter and summer, but pursuit planes have a short range and thus better facilities are needed to ensure adequate landing space and radio guidance. The new bases also will be equipped to handle the largest bombers which fly long but need longer runways when they land. The existing commercial line operates 2 or 3 times weekly from Edmonton to Grand Prairie to Fort Nelson and thence to Whitehorse by way of Watson Lake and Teslin. It connects at Juneau with Pan American, which, however, suspends operations in winter. From Whitehorse, the line runs to Dawson and thence to Fairbanks. Planes already can fly a radio beam to Edmonton, and it is understood that beams will be installed over the whole route. Small short-range pursuit ships thus would be able to fly from Selfridge Field, Michigan, for instance, on a radio beam the whole way to an Alaskan base. The route also is feasible in summer for seaplanes because of numerous lakes. Washington, D.C., January 11th. Use of a string of Canadian-built airfields between the United States and Alaska, which, as reported, planned by the Dominion, presumably would be welcomed eagerly by the Army and Navy. There was no official indication, however, that the plan reported from Ottawa represented an agreement with the United States. General George C. Marshall, War Department Chief of Staff, disclosed this week that the United States now has increased forces in the territory to 3,000 troops and added that the force represents a development more important than the numbers would indicate. He said the Army's share of the new Alaskan defenses was ahead of schedule. The Army is building a $13,200,000 air base at Anchorage and a $4 million cold weather experimental station near Fairbanks. The Navy is building 3 air bases on the Alaskan coast, for which $17,125,000 has been appropriated. There have been proposals for joint construction by Canada and the United States of a highway link across British Columbia and the Yukon Territory. Anthony J. Diamond, Alaska's delegate in Congress and champion of the highway proposal, said recently such a road could be constructed in possibly 18 months at a cost of $30 million. Berlin, January 12th. A front-page editorial called "Thus Spake Roosevelt" in today's issue of Völkischer Beobachter, Adolf Hitler's newspaper, cites excerpts from speeches by Theodore Roosevelt and declares it would be worthwhile for Franklin D. Roosevelt to reread that elegant bundle of spoken wisdom. The article, which reflects German pique at present talks with the United States president, quotes Theodore Roosevelt's Chicago address of April 2nd, 1903, in which it said he declared that great statesmen of a great people owe it to the nation's self-respect to speak politely of foreign powers. The Deutsche Allgemeine Zeitung, discussing the proposed United States law to give President Roosevelt authority to broaden aid to Britain, described a clause that would permit belligerent warships to be repaired in United States shipyards. Dienst Euch Deutschland, well-informed press service, called attention to the 1907 Hague Convention, under which such service was to be refused in neutral harbors. Moscow, January 11th. The government and party press of the Soviet Union spoke out today sharply in justification of the new economic deal between Germany and Russia and rebuked British and American statesmen who may consider it warlike. Furthermore, the newspapers declared Moscow will make additional trade treaties in 1941 as she pleases with nations both at war and at peace. Buenos Aires sources have indicated that Russia is sending a mission there to buy much Argentine wheat that might be sent to Germany. It is time, said an editorial in Ivestia, the government organ, that the world understands the USSR follows an independent policy and continue to follow it. Both Ivestia and Pravda carried editorials that cast new significance on the expanded German-Russian trade pact signed here Friday, under which Germany is supposed to receive principally increased supplies of Soviet wheat. There are, said Ivestia, in Britain and the United States some leading statesmen who believe that the United States, in full conformity with international law and the position of neutrality, may sell to Britain everything, including even warships, whereas the Soviet Union cannot sell to Germany even cereals without violating the policy of peace. These strange contentions provide a curious example of juggling with international law and neutrality and can only have the meaning of a political maneuver. To refute hostile press suggestions that German-Russian agreements are directed against the third powers, Ivestia went on, in the course of 1940, the Soviet Union concluded and intends to conclude in 1941 economic treaties and agreements with other states, both belligerent and non-belligerent. Stockholm, Sweden, January 11th. Provisional extension of the training periods of Swedish Army conscripts from 140 to 360 days was proposed by the government today on recommendation of King Gustav. Havana, January 11th. If America is involved in war, Cuba will be found at the side of the United States in defense of the ideals of liberty, democracy, and justice. Carlos Saladrigas asserted today in behalf of President Fulgencio Batista, who is ill with a cold. Melbourne, Australia, January 11th. Australia already is committed to a war expenditure of more than $650 million in the year ending next June 30th. During the whole of the last war, the nation spent about $875 million. The new program has propelled Australia into an industrial revolution. At a cost of $165 million, she has established an armament industry surpassing India's in magnitude of output and is second only to Canada's among the Dominions. Since Essing Lewis, Director General of Munitions, assumed control of munitions production, assisted by 8 other leading industrialists, a new pace has been set in the rate of output. Airplane engines were in production within 6 months after receipt of blueprints from overseas, and a huge factory now is being equipped for the manufacture of optical glass aircraft instruments. London, January 11th. Railway workers at the East End docks won concessions today in a strike against carrying out highly dangerous compulsory fire watching duties at the ordinary rates of pay. They decided to return to work Monday after the company withdrew the compulsory fire watching plan and agreed to a readjustment of pay for such duties. At the same time, civil defense workers, including firemen, stretcher bearers, and rescue squads, presented to the Home Office a plea for a $2 a week pay increase because of mounting living costs. London, January 11th. The London Trades Council today protested against the scandal in the muddled meat supplies of Britain. It expressed concern specifically with the price reduction and equal distribution through the removal from power of those linked with combines and the food trust. Rome, January 11th. Jews are forbidden to take part in any branch of the Customs Administration, according to a Ministry of Interior ruling published today. The ban includes the so-called discriminated Jews who have special privileges because of army or party services in the past. Tokyo, January 11th. The official Japanese broadcasting station announced today it had decided as a result of the trend of the times to eliminate the use of the English language for broadcast within Japan. Arendal, Norway, via Berlin, January 11th. A 25-year-old workman, Rolf Hansen, was sentenced to death today by a court-martial charged with attacking a German soldier. Hansen was said to have left a Christmas party intoxicated. When the soldier asked him what time it was, according to the charge, Hansen struck the German. The soldier drew his bayonet, the court found, and then Hansen pulled out a pistol and shot the soldier through the lung. The soldier is recovering. Vatican City, January 11th. The personal air raid shelter of Pope Pius XII has been completed and the keys will be delivered to him in a few days after experts test the air conditioning and the furniture is installed. It is a steel-encased airtight compartment on the ground floor of the Vatican. Zurich, Switzerland, January 11th. James Joyce, Irish novelist, was reported doing very well in the hospital here following an emergency abdominal operation today. Long an invalid, he suffered a serious attack last night. Joyce, 58 years old, is the author of Ulysses, a story of one man's day in Dublin in June 1904. He came here recently with his wife, a son, and a grandson from the French Riviera. They settled in the house where they lived during the World War when they were forced to leave Trieste because Joyce was a British subject. Hey guys, if you enjoy this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them. And now back to national news. Washington, D.C., January 11th. The State Department tonight announced settlement of the dispute with Great Britain over the proposed United States Naval Base site at Trinidad. The British were persuaded to abandon insistence that the base be located on a swamp along the west coast that would involve reclamation of 25 miles of mosquito-breeding marshland. It was felt here that the British were seeking to have the United States remove a local pest hole under the guise of promoting the defense of the Western Hemisphere. American naval officers had said that the site was absolutely unfit for defense needs. The Trinidad sites, according to the announcement, include an area of 11 square miles on the northwestern peninsula for a naval base, another area of 18 square miles in the center of the island for the main United States Army air bases, and a small area elsewhere for an auxiliary airfield. In addition, the United States will have supply wharves, water supply facilities, and recreation fields. Earlier in the day, Secretary of State Cordell Hull announced 3 American officials will leave for London by clipper plane next Friday to negotiate the formal leases under which Britain made 8 defense bases available to this country on its territory in the Western Hemisphere in return for 50 American destroyers. At the same time, Hull said this country has no intention to pay property taxes or import duties to Britain on the bases which range from Newfoundland to British Guiana. Department officials acknowledged that British customs officials had attempted to collect such taxes. Washington, D.C., January 11th. War Department plans for extensive preparations for defense against poison gas were disclosed today with an announcement that contracts for gas mask, charcoal, and other chemicals used in gas defensive appliances amount to approximately $10 million. Some of the contracts already have been concluded, the department said, and negotiations are proceeding on the others. More than half of the total will cover the cost of government-owned plants and to be constructed by the firms concerned. The companies which will operate such plants are the Monsanto Chemical Company, St. Louis, at a new plant to be constructed at East St. Louis, Illinois, the Dow Chemical Company, Midland, Michigan, and the E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company, Niagara Falls, New York. Detroit, January 11th. Robot planes controlled by radio from another airplane or from the ground are undergoing experimental testing by the Army Air Corps at Selfridge Field, headquarters of the 6th Pursuit Wing. 4 ships completely equipped for robot flight are at the field now, and more are expected from Texas bases where they were developed. For test purposes, a pilot is carried in the robot plane during the flight. A flip of a switch and he can take over manual control. Sending apparatus installed in the observer's cockpit of an observation plane or in a truck on the ground enables a pilot to maneuver the robot plane from a distance. He can control the robot plane as long as it remains within sight. Washington, D.C., January 11th. Removal of beans from their established position on the Army mess table today rallied congressmen from Michigan, a leading bean-producing state, to champion the lowly fare as the author of all-American victories from the Revolutionary War through the World War. Captain Ira K. Evans of the Army Quartermaster Corps confirmed the reports that the bean, present on almost every mess table in the past, has been routed by progress. Modern refrigeration and transportation are now bringing fresh vegetables and fruits to Army bases' tables year-round. I fought for months on beans, said Representative Jesse P. Wolcott, Port Huron, Republican. The bean must be restored to its honored place. Representative Fred L. Crawford, Saginaw Republican, inserted into the congressional record the following outburst from no less a poet than Robert Browning. He knew the right thing, did it, and thanked God when 'twas done. But of all he had to thank for, my fancy somehow leans to thinking what most moved him was a certain meal of beans. Business and industry moved at a still faster clip last week in turning out the materials of war and peace. Factories throughout the country worked harder at the task of manufacturing everything from buttons to battleships, and plans were made for plant construction on a still larger scale. Industries which were not operating at all-time high levels were the exception. Industrial executives who a comparatively short time ago were worried about excess plant capacities dusted off factories which had fallen into depression, disuse, and returned them to active service. It was agreed that any material acceleration in the rate of production in most industries depends upon the construction of new plant facilities and 24-hour operation of plants which are not being operated at peak levels or lengthening of working hours. Washington, D.C., January 11th. An appeal on grounds of patriotism and the terrible urgency of the situation to all industry engaged in national preparedness projects to end the 2-day weekend and go on the 6-day week will be made soon by the new Office of Production Management, it was learned tonight. Industry will be urged to pay the usual time and a half for overtime after 40 hours and enable the nation to speed its rearmament program and to increase the output of supplies for Britain. This appeal has been in the mind of William S. Knudsen, Director General of Production on the four-man Super Defense Organization for some time, it was said. It is expected that an agreement between him, Sidney Hillman, his associate, and Secretaries Frank Knox and Henry L. Stimson will be reached on the proposal. Some employers have been reported to be reluctant to go to the 6-day week because of the overtime requirements under the Walsh-Healy and Fair Labor Standards Act. Recently, correspondence on the subject was made public between Alfred P. Sloan, Jr., head of the General Motors Corporation, and Colonel Philip B. Fleming, head of the Labor Department's Division of Wages and Hours. However, in defense industries, labor spokesmen have been willing to have union members work longer than the 40-hour a week, provided the overtime payments were made. Some industries producing equipment for the nation and military needs already are working men more than 40 hours. The machine tool industry is working 3 shifts a day and in many cases 7 days a week. The aircraft industry is working beyond 40 hours. Other industries already working more than 40 hours a week include electrical machinery. The Hudson Motor Car Company yesterday announced that it had contracted to build and operate a $13 million ordnance plant for the United States Navy on the site about 5 miles from the Hudson plant in Detroit. Only one Chicago company, Fairbanks Morrison Company, was reported as having received a defense order. Its order was for spare parts for auxiliary engines costing $24,456. The Hudson Company said that the Navy Department has purchased the land for the site of the ordnance plant, a 114-acre tract at Mound and 9 Mile roads. Construction will be started immediately under the supervision of Hudson engineers. Purchase of machinery, tools, and other items is in progress. The plant will consist of about 400,000 square feet of machine shop and assembly space, an office building, and a structure for storage and other services. About 4,000 men will be employed. Guns and torpedoes will be among the products manufactured. Hudson will operate the plant at least until 1944. Stockholders yesterday approved a proposal to broaden the Hudson charter so as to enable the company to engage more fully in defense activities. The Navy announced a $2,254,342 contract for a floating dry dock at Galveston, Texas, which was awarded to Todd Galveston Dry Docks Incorporated. About 9 months will be required for construction. The dock will be 614 feet long with a lifting capacity of 18,000 tons and will be able to accommodate cruisers. In addition, it will be able to give service to freighters which have not had adequate dry dock facilities on the Gulf heretofore. New York, January 11th. A threatened strike involving orders for $7,750,000 worth of Army and Navy aircraft engines was averted today when, after negotiators finally cracked a wage dispute deadlocked at the Fairchild Corporation plant at Farmingdale. Shortly before dawn, John R. Owens, Labor Relations Assistant of the National Defense Commission, emerged from a 36-hour conference to announce the settlement. The dispute centered principally upon demands of the United Automobile Workers of America, CIO, for higher starting wages in the company's Ranger Engineering division. Miami, Florida, January 11th. The Duke of Windsor almost broke up the air races here this afternoon when he arrived unexpectedly for his second visit to Florida since he became governor of the Bahamas. He was not accompanied by the Duchess and remained only 2 hours, never leaving his box in the grandstand until he boarded an amphibian plane that returned him to his island domain. The Duke's arrival was really a surprise, even though the air race management had talked hopefully of the possibility. Privately, the race authorities admitted that although an official invitation to attend had been extended to the Duke and Duchess weeks ago by Governor S.L. Holland of Florida, they had heard no word from Nassau. General Robert E. Wood, National Chairman of the America First Committee, appealed last night to Americans who still value their liberty to flood Washington with protests against President Roosevelt's Aid to Britain bill. The America First Committee will oppose this bill with all the vigor it can exert, General Wood said in a statement. We must swamp this or any other suggestion that American democracy cannot be depended upon to protect itself in its own way. Demands for full, separate, and open hearings on the measure have been wired to the chairman of the Senate and House Foreign Relations Committees, his statement declared. Illinois congressmen to whom protests may be sent are listed. They're listed on page 1 of the Metropolitan section, which I am not going to read to you. Sorry about that. I read these articles cold, and I missed that. Following is General Wood's statement. The tragic irony of this bill is that it seeks to protect democracy by abandoning democracy. We would lose the fight before it began. The president is not asking for a blank check. He wants a blank checkbook with the power to write away our manpower, our laws, and our liberties. In a few brief provisions, this bill wipes out every safeguard we have devised to protect our nation in times like these. In effect, the bill gives the power to make a military alliance of his own choosing and to implement that alliance in whatever way he sees fit. The power to make such an alliance means war. Is that what the people want? The decision is still up to them. Never before have the American people been told that they must place their destiny in the hands of one man. The fact that such a bill could have been introduced is a sign of loss of faith in self-government from those who sponsored it. Tulsa, Oklahoma, January 11th. The national security of the United States does not depend on Great Britain's victory in the war, Alf M. Landon declared in a speech here tonight. The question of this republic's survival, he said, will be decided at home. If we enter the war to defeat totalitarianism abroad, Landon warned, we will strengthen its hold here. He predicted that the addition of a long war to President Roosevelt's personal government with the suspension of the Bill of Rights plus a post-war period's economic suffering and racial hatreds may put the republic through the rock crusher. Landon, in an interview before his speech, asserted that the administration plans to allow repairing and outfitting of British warships in United States ports would import the war into America. He said he had made a preliminary study of the Lend-Lease sale plan of aid for England and had concluded that President Roosevelt was jumping over the ocean. Step by step, Landon added, he's leading us into war. The 1936 Republican presidential nominee remarked that the president's proposals were unusual, coming from a man who 60 days ago was promising peace. Landon asserted that the broad powers sought in the bill would result in a national dictatorship. Eau Claire, Wisconsin, January 11th. Asserting he is disturbed by the rising tide of war hysteria, the Right Reverend Frankie Wilson, Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Eau Claire, tonight withdrew permission to use his name on the letterhead of the Committee to Defend America by Aiding the Allies. The bishop, who was a World War chaplain with the AEF, has been a member of the interventionist organization since its inception. The bill now before Congress, vesting the president with unprecedented powers, seems to be no less than preposterous. Bishop Wilson wrote, I am more concerned over such trends within our own country than I am over threats from abroad. Omaha, Nebraska, January 11th. Brigadier General George V. Strong, former chief of the General Staff's War Plans Division, offered his personal and private opinion today that on January 1st, England stood a 55 to 45% chance to win the war with Germany. General Strong, now commander of the 7 Corps area with headquarters here, explained in an interview that his odds were 70-30 on Germany last June 1st, but by September 1st, they had dropped to 55-45 still on Germany. Then they switched to England. And England became his favorite. He was in England as an American observer for several months last fall. He predicted that a balance of military factors shifting toward the British, plus a possible critical shortage of German oil and gasoline supplies, will cause Germany to try desperately for a knockout by summer. The most serious menace to England, General Strong said, is Germany's counter-blockade and the sinking of British ships by submarines, surface raiders, and planes. He said any invasion of England would be a desperation move and added there was no reason to believe rumors that an invasion had been started last fall and turned back. General Strong also predicted the war will develop into a two-front fight, with the second front in Italy, the Balkans, or the Near East. This would help England because Germany probably would be pressed for usable troops, Strong explained. Washington, D.C., January 11th. Oliver A. Quayle, general manager of the Democratic National Committee, told the Senate Campaign Committee today that he had made a mistake in testifying 2 days ago that he personally arranged for loans of $300,000 for the 1940 Democratic campaign from R.J. Reynolds. Reynolds, the Democrat Committee's new treasurer, testified yesterday that it was Wayne Johnson, finance director of the committee, who had arranged the loans in a telephone conversation with Reynolds at Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Corroborating Reynolds' testimony, Quayle said today that this was something that happened at a very hectic time some months ago, adding that there was no reason not to tell the entire details. Senator Charles W. Tobey, Republican New Hampshire, a member of the Senate Campaign Committee, broke in to say that Quayle was guilty of perjury and accused him of trying to shield Johnson of collusion in this matter. I deny any such, Quayle shouted. You can deny till doomsday, Tobey interrupted. There could be no purpose for the conceding of these facts, Quayle replied. Evidently, I made a mistake. I talked to Reynolds many times. I was making telephone calls all over the country trying to raise money 16 or 18 hours a day. Toby read from Quayle's previous testimony in which he detailed telephone conversations with Reynolds to make the loan. Quayle said that 20 persons were working to raise money at the Democratic headquarters and that when he used I in his testimony, he did that because he was in charge. It's the acme of evasion for you to say we are not to take your testimony at par and that I contacted him means that someone else did, Toby shouted. Toby fired a series of questions about contracts for radio broadcasts of President Roosevelt and his supporters, dates of these, amounts paid, and when. Quayle said he could not answer from memory but promised to supply all the data from records. Newark, New Jersey, January 11th. With the Supreme Court apparently having adopted the attitude that legislation relating to national, social, and economic change is a matter of policy and hence not subject to judicial review, a new and wholly unique responsibility has been shifted to Congress, which now is the court of last resort in testing the validity of such legislation, Jacob Lashley of St. Louis, president of the American Bar Association, said here today. Addressing the New Jersey State Bar Association, Lashley declared that this shift of responsibility has placed power back in the hands of the people who will need disinterested leadership more than ordinarily in these confused and dangerous times. Such leadership, he said, can be provided by lawyers. Discussing the lawyer's place in national defense, Lashley said he had found a great deal of confusion and fear. We need leadership, he added. I have some hope that lawyers will answer the call. On them rests a new responsibility of explanation, analysis, and exposition to hold up the meanings of democracy. Leading up to his discussion of Congress's new responsibility, he discussed the system of checks and balances contained in the Constitution, emphasized that the system needs constant attention, and if neglected, would destroy itself. Anchorage, Alaska, January 11th. Colonel O.F. Olson, president of the Alaska Rural Rehabilitation Corporation Directorate, today threatened ouster action within 30 days unless Matanuska federal farm colonists seeking to invalidate their land purchase contracts make token payments to show good intentions. Olson said that between 40 and 45 colonists have been working on the Anchorage Air Base project and have earned about $1,800 each in the last 6 months, but that some refuse to pay their debts and are neglecting their farms. His announcement followed a conference last night at which a committee submitted recommendations on land use problems in the valley. The recommendations, making no reference to threatened court action to test validity of the contracts with the government, were submitted by Lawrence Arndt, formerly Forest County, Wisconsin, and Henry LaRose, former Price County, Wisconsin farmer, two of the colonists. The committee included representatives of the colonists, the University of Alaska Extension Service, the Matanuska Experimental Farm, the Alaska Fire Control Service, the Alaska Road Commission, the Matanuska Valley Farmers Cooperative Association, and the ARRC. Jefferson City, Missouri, January 11th. Governor-elect Forrest C. Donnell tonight cast aside plans to be inaugurated Monday and declared he will take his fight for the office to the Supreme Court. The Webster Groves Republican announced his decision 12 hours after a night-long session of the legislature had refused to certify his apparent election over Lawrence McDaniel, Democrat. Atlanta, Georgia, January 11th. Governor E.D. Rivers announced tonight he would hear Richard G. Gallagher's personal plea for executive clemency from a life sentence for murder on Monday. The retiring governor said he understood the Atlanta Journal has complied with my condition that they print certain affidavits, and I am therefore granting Gallagher his request to appear before me and make a personal statement. Yesterday, Governor Rivers told Gallagher's family he would not hear a new clemency appeal unless the Atlanta Journal printed affidavits that no fees were involved, signed by 8 persons he designated. He said the Journal, formerly owned by members of Gallagher's family, had imputed a pardoning racket to the governor. Today, the Journal printed affidavits signed by Gallagher's mother, Mrs. Worth Yankee, and that's not a name you want from in the South. Sorry. His wife, John A. Bryce, John Paschal, George C. Biggers, and C. E. Gregory of the present Journal staff, and James R. Gray and Inman Gray, who formerly were connected with the paper. Mrs. Yankee said she had paid $1,800 to the law firm for services in a previous clemency hearing, but that she had neither paid nor promised to pay anyone in connection with the present appeal. The others attested they had no knowledge of any fees paid or to be paid. The present owner of the Journal, James N. Cox, answered Governor Rivers' criticism of the paper in a front-page editorial entitled, "Do Your Duty, Mr. Governor." Gallagher was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1928 for the hold-up slaying of a drugstore clerk. At that time, the Gray family, of which he is a member, owned controlling stock in the Journal. Fort Worth, Texas, January 11th. The death of H.F. Cox, 19 years old, who was stabbed with a pocket knife in the presence of his 14-year-old bride of a week, resulted in the filing of a murder charge today against the farm youth's father-in-law. The prisoner, E.T. Brewer of Ector, Texas, said the family had been looking for the girl, Virginia Ruth, since she disappeared on Monday from Ector High School, where she was an honor student. The girl's parents located the bride and bridegroom yesterday at a residence. "We had pulled our girl from his side and he made a lunge for me," Brewer was quoted by Detective A.C. Howerton. "I raised my left arm to ward off the blow and struck him with my pocket knife. Cox's jugular vein was severed. His father was reported in a state of collapse. Another son was killed last month in an automobile accident." Las Vegas, Nevada, January 11th. Film comedian Stan Laurel, 50 years old, remarried the second of his four wives, Virginia Ruth Laurel, 41, of Beverly Hills, California, in a surprise ceremony today. They were re-wed at the Hitching Post Wedding Chapel by the Reverend Albert C. Melton of Emmanuel Community Church using an old-fashioned gold ring. They were first married in Mexico in April 1934 and divorced in December 1936. Laurel and his fourth wife, Vera Ilyana Laurel, Russian dancer, were divorced in 1939. The couple will remain here until Monday before returning to Hollywood. Well, happy anniversary!
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them.
And now for local and regional news. A total of 575 draftees from Cook County were inducted into the Army for a year of military training during the first 4 days of the January period. It was announced yesterday by Chicago Selective Service officials. Of this group, 271 were volunteers who elected to start their year's service before their order number is called by their local draft boards. 97 of the draftees accepted at the Chicago Induction Center in the 122nd Field Artillery Armory, 234 East Chicago Avenue, during the 4 days were sent to the Army Reception Center at Fort Custer near Battle Creek, Michigan. The remaining 478 conscripts were sent to Fort Sheridan. To select the 575 men who were inducted, Army medical specialists and psychiatrists examined 720 prospects, rejecting 145. The main causes of rejection were teeth, 42 men, mental and nervous conditions, 17, vision, 15, hearing, 14, and alcoholism, 12. The January inductions, which began on January 3rd, were ordered discontinued from January 9th to January 16th next Thursday because of a delay in the construction of the camps in which the draftees will train. 150,000 National Guardsmen would be in the Army today if there were barracks in which to house them, according to Brigadier General Louis B. Hershey, Deputy National Selective Service Director, who stopped here briefly yesterday on his way to a meeting of Illinois Draft Board heads in Springfield. General Hershey was hopeful that the Army's housing problem would be under control by the middle of February. Draft quotas are being filled chiefly by volunteers, he said, adding, "We really haven't had to produce men. The number of volunteers has been so heavy that the first 3 months that the draft boards haven't run into their biggest trouble yet." General Hershey termed the public's acceptance of selective service as the most remarkable phenomenon I've ever seen. "We have less difficulty from parents than we expected," he said. "They seem to take the draft as a patriotic gesture and think the year's training will do their boys good." Visiting hours at Fort Sheridan were restricted yesterday by Lieutenant Colonel Fred During, executive officer. The new orders limit persons entering the reservation for sightseeing purposes to 1 hour each from noon to 5 p.m. Commercial callers may enter the post during the same hours on weekdays only. Those desiring to call on enlisted men may do so from noon to 11 p.m. weekdays and from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. on Sundays. Charlestown, Indiana, January 11th. Work here on the government's $74 million smokeless powder plant, which is taking shape with incredible swiftness and the biggest project of its kind the world has ever seen, has caused a boom that is making deep-lying changes in the business, social, and economic affairs of this old Clark County town. Last summer, Charlestown still was a quiet community of 950 persons, mostly the families of retired farmers, and corn was waving in the fields that lay just to the east across the highway. But on October 1st, 41 men moved into the fields to break ground for the 5,000-acre government project, and the boom was on. Today, more than 16,000 are working day and night on ground where crops had flourished through all of Charlestown's nearly 140 years of existence, and the population of the town now stands between 3,500 and 4,000. Most of the workers have had to go to nearby centers, including Louisville, Kentucky, to find housing. Many are in farm homes. Caught in a whirlwind of activity, Charlestown is trying, still a little dazedly, to adjust itself to the problems and benefits that have been dumped upon it by the boom. There is no phase of the community's activities, no life pattern of an individual resident that has not in some manner been changed or colored in the reflection of the government's vast undertaking. The Farm Equipment Workers Organizing Committee, CIO, announced yesterday that strikes had been authorized by union members employed in 6 plants of the International Harvester Company. The union presented a new series of demands in a controversy dating from 1937 and said that strikes would be called if necessary to enforce them. Company officials who the day before had settled a CIO United Automobile strike, which had been in progress since December 31st, at another plant at Fort Wayne, Indiana, said they were unable to comment on the new demands because the controversy is before the National Labor Relations Board awaiting final decision. More than 100,000 signatures demanding that President Roosevelt refrain from taking sides in the European war and cease inflammatory denunciations of belligerents have been obtained by the Citizens Keep America Out of War Committee, William J. Grace, chairman, said yesterday. He said petitions were signed by 98% of the persons asked. The petitions state that America's resources of men and materials must be used in building our own defenses to meet the threat of invasion. Under all circumstances, the petitions assert the door must be kept open for all possible discussions of peace. Governor-elect Dwight H. Green announced yesterday the 5 members of the Advisory Employment Committee on which he pins his hopes of improving the caliber of state payrollers while holding political friction to a minimum. The announcement was made as Green vacated his pre-inaugural headquarters in Chicago. He will take the oath of office in Springfield tomorrow. The advisory committee will deal with more than 9,000 applications for jobs which already are in Green's hands and with several times that number which are in the hands of various GOP county chairmen. It will be the duty of the committee, Green said, to examine the qualifications of the applicants and make recommendations to him. Investigation of the acts of outgoing Governor John Stell, especially during his 100 days as governor, will be sought tomorrow by a member of his own party in the Illinois House of Representatives, Joseph Sam Perry, Democrat Glen Ellen. Perry said yesterday he will introduce a resolution asking for an inquiry of broad scope. Informed of Perry's statement, Governor Stell said, "I don't like to answer a crybaby. The more you answer one, the more he cries." Perry, a follower of the late Governor Henry Horner, frankly admitted that he might not now be attacking Stell, but for the fact that the governor has fired some of Perry's friends. Perry opposed Stell's choice for House Minority Leader W.O. Edwards of Danville, who was defeated at the opening of the session a few days ago. If Stell is guilty of actions alleged in countless newspaper stories, it should be made a matter of official record, said Perry, a former master in chancery and one-time coal miner. If he is exonerated in a fair and open hearing, I will support him for governor in 1944. Stell's activities as lieutenant governor with the duty of presiding over the Senate and as acting governor should also be brought into the investigation, Perry said. It has often been charged that Stell was deeply involved in the oil business and blocked regulatory legislation while he was acquiring land leases in the Illinois oil fields, Perry said. The Summerdale police reported yesterday that 30 robberies on the north side in the last 2 months had been solved through the arrest of 5 young bandits. One of the youths is a deserter from the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. 2 others recently returned from a joint honeymoon trip, which was financed by robbery proceeds. All confessed their parts in the robberies, the police said. Those in custody are John Carroll, 18 of 5942 North Paulina Street, Robert Pretraborg, 18 of 5108 Glenwood Avenue, Dale Williams, 19 of 5107 Kenmore Avenue, Raymond Roden, 17 of 2417 Gunnison Street, and Edmund Burke, 19 of 1446 Ardmore Avenue. The police also held Williams' wife Dorothy, who married him a month ago. Roden's bride of 3 weeks, Betty, 17, was not held because of her age. Both women said they did not know of their husband's crime activities. Petra Borg, who enlisted in the Navy last September and deserted a month ago, said he committed several robberies while in the service. He told police he obtained leaves of absence and changed to civilian clothes and assisted his companions in holdups. Burke was arrested early last week for the theft of an automobile and placed on probation for a year by Judge Charles S. Doherty in felony court. Later, Sergeants William O'Brien and Eugene McNally learned that the car had been used in a North Side robbery. The officers laid a trap and, with the aid of detectives Peter Cools and Lewis Miller, seized Petraborg, Roden, and Williams when the 3 returned to Williams' apartment Friday night after having committed 3 robberies. Some of the loot was found in their possession. The trio implicated Burke in 2 robberies and he was rearrested. The arrest of Carol and Mrs. Williams followed. Burke admitted the 2 robberies and 3 auto thefts, and the police said. Altogether, police asserted more than 15 automobiles were stolen by the youths. The honeymoon trip of the 2 couples was made in a stolen car, the youth said. Business was brisk yesterday in a basement handbook at 411 South Wabash Avenue. 2 police details raided the establishment within 45 minutes and each found bet-taking in progress. 5 employees were arrested in the 2 raids. The first detail from the Central Police District was directed by Captain Thomas Duffy. Those seized in its raid were Joseph Campanegro, 714 South Oakley Avenue, and Thomas DiCapo, 246 West 23rd Street. This pair had hardly been locked up when the second squad from Commissioner Allman's office made its entrance and found business going along as usual. These raiders were unaware there had been a previous raid. The men arrested by the second squad were Vincent Sarno, 4144 Fifth Avenue, Michael Skeege, 246 West 23rd Street, and Peter Scotti, 436 West 31st Street. The 5 were held without booking. An ex-convict and a police character were in custody last night as suspects in the holdup of a Blue Island gambling house and tavern. They are Peter John Montana, 25 years old, who said he lives at 1639 Orchard Street, and Joe Muscarello, 29, who gave 2413 South Spalding Avenue as his address. Blue Island police said they found $400 of the $600 loot in the men's pockets and that some of the 30 patrons robbed identified them. Four bandits invaded the gambling house and tavern operated by Gus Gurgle at 12834 Southwestern Avenue in the suburb early yesterday. They slugged policeman Fabian Mitchell and fought a gun battle with 6 other Blue Island police. A patron, Michael Margold of 2250 Prairie Street, Blue Island, was wounded slightly. The bandits fled. Montana and Muscarello were seized soon afterwards by Captain William Hankey of the Blue Island Police and Chief John Pisa of the Calumet Park Police. Montana and the ex-convict served a year in Pontiac on a charge of petty larceny and a year and 8 months in the Bridewell on a similar charge. Muscarello served 2 years in the Bridewell on a charge of robbery. 3 suspects captured in a stolen car yesterday near Lavergne Avenue and Maypole Street after police fired a warning shot have confessed 14 recent street robberies, according to policeman Michael Fleming of the Fillmore Street Station. The 3 identified themselves as Earl Warren, 17 years old, Arthur Warner, age 18, of 2948 Polk Street, and Robert Van Kuren, 18, of 15 North Kedzie Avenue. J. Albert Wohl, United States Attorney, yesterday asked the clerk of the Federal District Court and the United States Marshal to collect $265,877 from Al Capone, former gang chieftain. The government won a judgment for that amount against Capone last August in a suit to collect income tax payments evaded in the years 1924 through 1929. Austin Hall, Assistant United States Attorney, said an unsuccessful search had been made in Chicago since the judgment was granted for property owned by Capone. Execution of the judgment will permit the government to confiscate Capone property wherever it might be found in the United States. Mrs. Stanley Goodfriend of 5114 Greenwood Avenue reported to police that she lost 2 diamond rings valued at $3,300 yesterday in the washroom of a North Michigan Avenue store. Mrs. Goodfriend, the wife of an executive of the Illinois Watch Case Company, said she removed the rings to wash her hands and that they were gone when she remembered them and returned to the washroom. An investigation was underway yesterday into a 511 fire which swept through the 4-story building of the Kearns and Smith Spice Company Incorporated at 10 West Kinsey Street early in the morning. Damage was estimated at $75,000. Fire Commissioner Michael J. Corrigan asked the investigation after the first fireman who arrived told him the flames seemed to burst forth from all 4 floors simultaneously. Earl R. Downs, Assistant Corporation Counsel assigned to fire investigations, questioned Arthur C. Smith, Secretary-Treasurer of the company, and ascribed the fire to an undetermined cause. He said the investigation would continue, but that he had found no evidence of incendiarism. The blaze, which may have started with an explosion on the first floor, was discovered by Northwestern Railroad's switching crew, which turned in the first alarm. Chicago thus far has escaped the mild form of influenza epidemics which have been reported prevalent in other parts of the country. Dr. Herman N. Bunsen, president of the Board of Health, said last night there has been the usual seasonal rise in colds in Chicago, but there is no indication at present of pneumonia or influenza cases in large numbers. Health officials at LaGrange, Indiana, said that 142 pupils, a third of those in the LaGrange school, and 3 teachers and an administrator have had influenza. At Lansing, Michigan, Dr. H.A. Moyer, state health commissioner, said a mild form of influenza had spread through Michigan until epidemic proportions had been reached. He added that a few cases had developed serious complications. In Boston, Massachusetts, 18,000 children were absent from school the last 2 days because of illness. Officials were hopeful that classes could be resumed Monday. About 2,500 mild influenza cases were reported in Connecticut. There were 13,526 cases reported in Arkansas between December 14th and January 4th. Cases were reported also in Georgia, Louisiana, and South Carolina. Fast work by Henry Watts, 13037 Green Bay Avenue, was credited yesterday with saving the life of one of two brothers who tumbled into Hyde Lake, 130th Street and Mackinac Avenue, when the ice on the lake broke beneath them. The boys are Eugene Giemzik, 9 years old, and Richard, 8, of 13542 Buffalo Avenue. Police said they were playing with a group of children when the ice broke. As they plunged into the water, their playmates ran for aid to the nearby home of Watts, a watchman. Watts hastened to the lake. Richard already was ashore, but Eugene was beneath the water, which was just over his head, with only his hand above water. Watts ducked into the water twice before he pulled the boy out. When he took both boys to his home and after giving Eugene artificial respiration, put both to bed.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this channel, check out our companion channel to this one, the World War II Old Time Radio channel. Over there, you will hear radio broadcasts of the newsmakers, the news reporters, and various entertainment programs, comedy, drama, horror, all kinds of fun stuff. And you will also get the #1 song every Friday that is represented on that channel as the radio programs correspond with the newspapers that you hear. Each upload premieres the same night the newspaper premieres that you are listening to right now. We even feature movie serials and classic movies on there when YouTube permits it. So swing over to the World War II Old Time Radio channel and click on that bell icon to subscribe. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well and click on that bell icon. I know you'll enjoy them.
And in sports, Columbus, Ohio, January 11th. Northwestern played and lost its first Western Conference basketball game of the season tonight. After twice pulling up to within 3 points of Ohio State in the second half, the Wildcats were through for the night, and the Buckeyes won 46-40 for their second consecutive conference triumph before 5,120. After a slow start by both teams, Ohio State broke a 12-12 tie midway in the first half and never was headed. The Buckeyes led at halftime 21-17. Early in the second half, Ohio ran its lead to 33-23, and here it was that Northwestern put on one of its two spurts. Russ Wendland scored once from the field, Henry Klassen dropped in two baskets, and Clarence Haase counted on a long shot to cut the Buckeyes' lead to 37-34, and with 8 minutes to play. The Ohioans scoring 4 points while all this was going on. Dick Fisher of Ohio and Bob McCarnes of Northwestern matched field goals, but Jack Graff and Captain Gil Michelson scored for the Buckeyes to make the score 43-36. Then the Wildcats came up within 3 points again when Klassen made one of his two free throw attempts, and Don Clausen made a free shot. The Wildcats took timeout, and Art Setter, substituted for Klassen, scored two from the side. The Buckeyes, though, rallied. Graff making a free throw and Fisher clinching the battle with a short basket. Clausen was the game's high scorer with 12 points, one more than Clausen, C-L-A-W-S-O-N, was the game's high scorer with 12 points, one more than Klassen, C-L-A-S-O-N, made. Michelson, who sat on the bench most of the first half, sparked the winners in the final period, making 9 points and playing a strong defensive game. Jack McClain, substitute center, led Ohio with 10 points. Ohio State will play Chicago in Columbus Monday night. Champaign, Illinois, January 11th. Indiana, paced by William Mankey, served the notice on the rest of the Big Ten tonight that it is the team to beat in the Western Conference race. The Hoosiers scored 48 to 38 victory over Illinois in their first conference game of the season. Mankey, with 11 baskets and 2 free throws for 24 points, was the high scorer of the game. The tall center made his 11 goals while taking only 15 shots at the ring. Indiana took the lead from the outset and never was behind. At the half, the Hoosiers commanded a 22-14 lead. The Illini found the Hoosier defense airtight, and nearly 11 minutes elapsed before Art Matheson scored their first basket. Meanwhile, Mankey had started the Hoosiers on the way to victory with 2 baskets. The Illini and Hoosiers traded baskets as the second half opened, but Illinois could get no closer to the winners than 6 points. The officials called 38 fouls in all, 22 of them on the Hoosiers and 16 on Illinois, but each team lost only 1 man because of 4 fouls. Lafayette, Indiana, January 11th. Purdue pulled up on even terms in the Big Ten basketball race tonight as it staved off a hard-fighting Michigan quintet to win 41-40. The defending champions were pressed by a determined Michigan 5 that had all the better of the play around the bank boards, largely due to the brilliant performance of Jim Mandler, 6'4" center. The officials' ruling disallowing a Michigan free throw prevented the game from going into overtime. With 6 minutes of play left in the second half, Grissom scored from the foul line, but it was ruled that one toe was behind the line. The first half ended with the score 18-18. It was still tied at 23-23 with 5 minutes of the second period gone when Don Blanken put Purdue in the lead 25-23 on free throws. Sophia countered with a short shot to make it 25-25, but Purdue came right back on one-handed efforts by Blemker and Blanken for a 4-point lead, the largest margin the Boilermakers were able to pile up at any stage of the game. Michigan, fighting gamely, rushed back in front 32-30 as Sofiak, Grissom, and Mandler counted from the field, and Grissom picked up a charity point, while the best Purdue could do was add a point when Blanken counted on Grissom's foul. Purdue bounced back into the lead 34-32 on shots by Blemker and Sproul with 9 minutes left to play. Brogan and Sproul traded long shots, and Igny hit one from the back of the free throw line as Purdue's lead increased to 39-35. Mandler and Blanken scored to make it 41-37 with 4 minutes to go, after which Grissom counted on Blanken's foul and Mandler scored a goal. Bradley's Braves went on the warpath last night in the Coliseum. In as exciting a game as ever played in the collegiate doubleheader series, the Peorians not only served DePaul its second defeat of the year, 48-35, but the battle threatened at one time to turn into an old-fashioned gang fight. Undefeated DeQuins whipped Loyola in the opening game 33-28. Midway in the second half of the Bradley-DePaul conflict, when the score was tied for the 4th time at 34-all, Bradley spurted to a 7-point lead, which eventually decided the contest. This also dictated the Bradley stalling a delay tactic that literally turned DePaul's players into wild men. With less than 3 minutes to go and still frustrated by Bradley's style of play, DePaul trailed 45-41. In a mix-up in the corner near DePaul's basket, Bradley's Lord Bortol handled DePaul's Elmer Gaynor a bit brusquely. Gaynor had the ball. As the boys clinched, Gaynor whirled and swung his fist at Bortol's jaw. The Bradley player dropped unconscious and was unable to continue for several minutes. The foul was Gaynor's 4th, and he left the court long before Bortol revived and scored 2 penalty shots to give his mates a 47-41 lead. This should have ended the excitement, but Bob Wozni had other ideas. The DePaul forward dropped in 2 field goals, and in the last 55 seconds, DePaul failed to tie In the last 55 seconds, DePaul failed of a tie score only because on a shot by Bernie Wexler, the ball rolled around and off the iron rim of the goal. With 18 seconds left of play, Bortel made his fifth free throw of the night to end the suspense. The first sellout crowd in the history of the Coliseum basketball watched last night's doubleheader. This throng, 8,234, saw Loyola lose a hard-played battle due to Quens, watched an intermission game between teams of youngsters directed by Willie Dorfman, and stayed until midnight to get the final returns on the Bradley DePaul scrap. Although getting away slowly, DePaul, led by Gaynor, outscored the Bradley boys from the field. But the Braves got 16 free throws in 24 attempts, and this provided the victory margin. Notre Dame, Indiana, January 11th. After being held to 7 points in the first half, Captain Eddie Riska scored 11 in the second period to lead Notre Dame to its third straight victory, 45-35 over Butler, before 4,500 tonight. The teams were tied 17-17 at the half. Butler lost Captain Bob Dietz and Lyle Neat on fouls, the latter after only 8 minutes of the second half. Larry Ryan, Irish guard, and Jim McCray, who played guard and forward for the Bulldogs, were ejected with 45 seconds remaining after a bumping incident blossomed into fisticuffs. Detroit, Michigan, January 11th. A Marquette rally in the second half fell short tonight, and the Hilltoppers lost to the University of Detroit basketball team 48-35. Madison, Wisconsin, January 11th. Iowa's basketball team, undefeated in 7 preliminary contests, lost to Wisconsin tonight 49-35 in the first conference game of the season for the Hawkeyes. The Badgers got off to an early lead on a basket and 2 free throws by sophomore Fred Rem, held a 22-19 advantage at the half, and gradually increased their margin in the second period. Gene Engund, senior center, who had been slow to regain his high scoring ability of last year, was right tonight, pushing through 8 field goals and a pair of free throws before leaving the game on personal fouls late in the second period. Captain Victor Siegel led the Hawkeyes attack with 10 points and played a good floor game. In addition to Rem, 2 other sophomores, Harlow Scott and Johnny Kotz, played a prominent part in Wisconsin's victory. Oshkosh, Wisconsin, January 11th. The Oshkosh All-Stars defeated the Chicago Bruins 43-36 in a National Professional Basketball game tonight. It was the Stars' 8th consecutive league victory and their 22nd this season. The Bruins led 30-24 at halftime, but 2 minutes after the start of the second half, the All-Stars treaded at 32 all, and then went ahead to stay. I think that's supposed to be tied at 32 all. The type was wrong. Giacomo Vincenzo Orlando, the unwashed ogre of the Blue Lines and last of hockey's bad men, and his associate Detroit Red Wings, including his lovable manager John Blasphemous Jack Adams, will appear against the Blackhawks in Chicago Stadium tonight in what sketchily is billed as a hockey match. They will appear, that is, unless they are arrested en route or belatedly set down by President Frank Calder of the National League, known as the Grand Old Man of Hockey. It is not likely that the rowdy pair will be arrested before the game, nor is it probable that hockey's grand old man will do anything to disappoint the anticipated capacity crowd, which obviously is fretting for an encore to the hoodlum skit Orlando and Adams put on when the Red Wings were here on the night of January 1st. On that occasion, Giacomo Vincenzo climaxed a night of bullying little Doug Bentley of the Hawks and other fighting by crumpling Charles Y. Freeman Jr., a spectator who since has become known as the king of the Gold Coast hecklers. Orlando dropped boxholder Freeman with as pretty a left as ever hit a wagging chin precisely on the button. Orlando has explained in all cities he has visited since the assault that he clouded Freeman because Freeman had hurt his feelings by calling him names. Lovable John, Giacomo's boss, has testified that he incited Orlando to the violent act against the spectator because he thought the box holder on the Warren Avenue side of the stadium were massing to lynch him, meaning Adams. No hockey game in recent memory has had such a smoke-up as tonight's affair. Like many grudge buildups, the expected rioting may not materialize, but nothing less than the noisiest night in the history of the stadium rink is a certainty. Observers are trying to determine in advance if Giancomo has been softened up a little by the stir over his hoodlum behavior or simply is conserving his resourcefulness for a big night tonight. The able young athlete, native of Italy and childhood resident of Montreal, has played in 3 games since he went berserk here and hasn't drawn so much as a minor 2-minute penalty in any of the 3 contests. Joseph Giuseppe Farrell, Hawk press agent, is clinging to the thought that some of the folks who will be in the red seats in the stadium tonight will be there to view scientific hockey play. Giuseppe's associate, Leo the Shadow Hayden, has just brought in the following from Mr. Farrell's pen. Both teams, the Hawks and the Red Wings, are basking in the sunlight of unbeaten runs. The Wings have gone through the last 8 games without suffering a defeat, and the Hawks have not been beaten in their last 3 engagements. The Hawks' comparatively tiny string, however, looms in a big way, for 2 of their clashes were away from home against the Boston Bruins, champions of the league and the greatest scoring unit in hockey, and the world champion New York Rangers. They also beat the Montreal Canadiens Thursday night 3-1, a team that won 7-5 in their last previous meeting. In all these games, Sammy Lepresti, rookie goalie, was in the nets. The Wings are the possessors of another string, a most humiliating one so far as the Hawks are concerned. For the date in the 4 clashes between the teams, the Wings have asserted their prowess over the Hawks in no uncertain manner, having won 4 victories in the 4 tries. In winning the 4 games, the Wings have made 15 goals, while the Hawks have made 4, 1 in each game. Last season, the Hawks defeated Detroit 6 times and played the Wings to 2 ties in 8 engagements. Toronto, Ontario, January 11th. The first-place Toronto Maple Leafs swamped the last-place New York Americans 9-0 in a National Hockey League game tonight. For the second successive game on Toronto ice, there were no penalties. The penalty box also was kept clear Thursday night when the Leafs defeated the New York Rangers 3-2 in overtime. The Leafs won out in front early in the first period for a 2-0 lead. They added 4 goals in the second session and 3 more in the closing 20 minutes. Gordon Drillin with 2 goals and 2 assists, and Sweeney Schreiner with 1 goal and 3 assists led the Leafs to victory before 10,326. Wally Stanowski picked up 3 assists, while Sile Apps counted 1 goal and helped on 2 others. Montreal, Quebec, January 11th. The Boston Bruins extended their unbeaten streak to 7 games tonight by defeating the Montreal Canadiens 2-1 with a third-period rally. They won into third place, breaking a tie with the Chicago Blackhawks. A crowd of 8,210 watched the Bruins break a scoreless tie on a goal by Eddie Weissman at 8:40 in the final period. Art Jackson broke from a furious Montreal assault to make it 2-0 late in the session. Just before Toe Blake fired the Canadiens' only goal with 25 seconds remaining. 28 members of the 1941 White Sox now are eligible for free room and board at the Pasadena, California training camp, which will have its annual inaugural next month under the management of Professor James Dykes. The list of signed performers was increased by 3 yesterday when the documents bearing the signatures of pitcher Orville Grove, infielder Warren Lorenz, and outfielder Chester Hadjuk reached the desk of Vice President Harry Grabiner. Progress also was reported from Cubs headquarters, General Manager James Gallagher receiving acceptances from shortstop Billy Myers, taken from the Reds in trade, and Bob Sturgeon, another shortstop who was shipped away last spring because of his fondness for fielding errors. Grove, Lorenz, and Hadjuk, all Chicago boys, aren't expected to start ablaze in the Sox camp, but they have future possibilities. The Sox have been schooling Grove for almost 2 years, so he's fairly well along in his prep work. He was at Oklahoma City last season, winning 10 while losing 9 for an earned run average of 2.89. Hadjuk, who is a first baseman as well as a fly chaser, was called in from the Lubbock, Texas farm. He drove in 139 runs last season. Lorenz, purchased from Wisconsin Rapids, where his brother played second base, is a product of Steidman's High School. Exclusive of 2 semi-pros signed last summer, the Cubs now have 9 of their men under contract, but at least 2 of the others have been heard from. Gallagher acknowledged yesterday he had received letters from 2 of the boys, both of whom explained they didn't want to be considered holdouts but would appreciate an increase in preferred pay. Their identities were not revealed. Eugene Stack, the Sox rookie who so far is known was the first to be lopped off a big league roster because of the draft law, is now in a full-fledged doughboy at Camp Custer, Michigan. He'll probably do the pitching for the camp team this summer and will get as much experience that way as if getting his baseball schooling at one of the White Sox farms. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, January 11th. Chubby Dean, big left-hand pitcher of the Philadelphia Athletics, became the first MAC man officially signed for the 1941 season with the receipt of his contract today. Manager Connie Mack revealed he had given Dean a slight raise over the salary the North Carolinian received in 1940 when he won 6 games and lost 13. Catcher Frankie Hayes announced several days ago he had signed his contract, but it has not yet been received by Mack. St. Louis, Missouri, January 11th. Rogers Hornsby, former Major League star and manager, will manage the Oklahoma City team of the Texas League again this season. The announcement was made by John D. Holland, president, and E.J. Humphreys, vice president of the Oklahoma City Club, after a conference with Hornsby. The Oklahoma City team finished 4th and qualified for the championship playoff after Hornsby took over the managerial reins last June. We'll have a young team with many new players, and we hope for another good season, Humphreys said. Business is booming in Oklahoma City, and we're glad Hornsby is going to be with us. Hornsby will conduct a baseball school at Hot Springs, Arkansas from February 15th to March 31st. And that is sports, and that is the news as read from the Chicago Tribune for Sunday, January 12th, 1941. Henry Chop reporting. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.